Section A to an introduction to ragtime, is what I'd like to think of this. This piece is called The Good Life, a Ragtime Excursion. And I really put it together, well, really just recently, as an exercise in a lot of typical things you hear in ragtime guitar. Now, ragtime means a lot of different things, or can mean a lot of different things. And the way I'm using it here, we're really talking about what would be considered classic ragtime. Now, this was a term that got applied to rags by people like Scott Joplin, and a little bit later James Scott, James Lamb, by really John Stark, a publisher we're talking about music from the first decade of the 20th century, 1900 to 1910, and it pretty much had died out by 1917 when Scott Joplin died. And jazz and other forms that really had a lot of this as an influence were kind of taken over a little bit more. The Tin Pan Alley songwriters were writing songs like Alexander's Ragtime Band, having nothing to do with classic ragtime. Now, the classic ragtime form has come to be known as a typical ragtime strain, or verse maybe, if you will, would be 16 measures. That's exactly what we had here in Section A of The Good Life. And it started off with a 4-measure introduction, just kind of introducing the chords, and that introduction used the idea of syncopation that is really important to ragtime. The real one of the biggest characteristics of ragtime is the piano has two things going on. The left hand playing very steady bass notes and chords. Now that translates really well on the guitar to steady single or alternating bass notes or moving bass notes. In either case, they're happening right on the beats. Whether we're thinking in 2/4 time, 4/4 time, I've written mine out in 4/4, but they typically you'd really feel 2 beats to a bar, and at the speed I was playing this, that would be very slow. We'd almost be feeling it as half notes, something along that line. But in the ease of reading it, I wrote it out in 4/4 time rather than 2/4 time. Now, Section A of this has a lot of the elements that you hear in the syncopated idea of what's going on in ragtime, and that is melody notes that are accented not necessarily on the first beat or a strong beat of the measure. And right in the first measure we hear that. There were 3 accented melody notes there, all that came on the and before a very strong beat. That high E right there, just before beat 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. So the ands before beats 1 and 3 are where you hear a lot of accents, and typically that accented note would carry over onto that strong beat. Really, really important aspect of ragtime. So this Section A of The Good Life is very playable. As long as you have a few basic finger-picking skills and some left-hand technique, mostly to be able to play chords. We've got a couple of bar chords in there. We go to an F-sharp 7 at one point, or just an F-sharp. And have a little melody picked out like that. Now, the introduction, the 4-measure intro, brings in the idea of chords being played on those early ands. That second grab of the E chord there is on the and of 1. 1 and 2, and then, oh, it's on an A chord. So this song, it actually starts on the subdominant chord 4, heading into a little cadence that lands on 1. Because we're gonna use that again later on when we connect Section 3 back to Section 1. Section C back to Section A. In any case, what we have in the intro is this idea of the chords being played before the bass note that the chord happens on. Here we hear an A diminished, before the A sharp diminished, before the A sharp in the beat on the beat, and then the next measure we have an E chord with B in the bass. Notes of a C sharp 7 chord before the C sharp in the bass. Notes of an F sharp 7 chord before the F sharp in the bass. A B7 before the bass. So the introduction there sets us up with the ragtime feel. Accented chords on ands that are carried over onto a strong beat. And then we just have a few simple chords in Section A. So in the next section, or in the next couple segments, I will walk through what we need to play section A, and as the next few weeks unfold, we will take a look at the 4 sections that I have to The Good Life, and each section gets a little bit more difficult. So really encourage you to start with section A, and pretty soon we'll have I'll have a video up playing the whole thing so you can hear what's coming ahead. But I kind of want to get this lesson rolling before everything is before I've finalized everything that's going on in all the other sections. So, okay, I think that's everything I wanted to tell you about this introduction to ragtime. We will take a look at section A of The Good Life in the next segment.